Hello friends, in today's session for Fundamentals of Management, we'll be talking and discussing the concept of decision making. In this presentation, we'll be talking about the concept and definition of decision making, the characteristics of decision making, its importance, and the process or the stages involved in the entire process of decision making. So moving further, let's first discuss what a decision is. As rightly said in the words of McFarland, a decision is an act of choice where an executive forms a conclusion about what must be done in a given situation. A decision represents a course behavior chosen from a number of possible alternatives. Thus, we can say that a decision involves the act of choice and the alternatives chosen out of the available alternatives. The process concerned with searching and evaluating alternatives to a problem and selecting the best alternative is known as decision making. Thus, we can say that decision making is a process of selection from a certain set of alternative courses of action, which is thought to fulfill the objectives of decision problem more satisfactorily than others. It is a course of action which is consciously chosen for achieving a desired result. Thus, a decision is something that takes place prior to the actual performance of a course of action that has been chosen. To state this in terms of managerial decision making, it is an act of choice wherein a manager selects a particular course of action from available alternatives in a given situation. Various authors have stated definitions of decision making. For example, in terms of George R. Terry, decision making is a selection based on some criteria from two or more possible alternatives. Similarly, Lewis Allen and Herbert Simon have given their definitions, which is stated in the presentation. Moving next, let's discuss the various features or characteristics of decision making. The basic characteristics can be stated as: number one, it is the process of choosing a course of action from among various alternative courses of action. Number second, it is a process involving to a great extent the application of intellectual abilities. Next, it is the end process preceded by deliberation and reasoning. It is always related to the environment. A manager may take one decision in a particular set of circumstances and another in a different set of circumstances. Decision making involves time dimension and a time lag. Next feature is it always has a purpose. Keeping this in view, there must be a decision not to decide. And the last feature can be stated as it involves all actions like defining the problem, probing, and analyzing the various alternatives which takes place before a final choice is made. So these were some of the characteristics of decision making. Moving on to the importance or significance of decision making. Although the experts have given their own views about the importance of decision making, but in consolidated points, the importance of decision making is as follows. Number one, management and decision making are inseparable. Manager has to take innumerable decisions in a day, and a successful manager has to take crucial decisions too. It is clear from the previous text that decision making is nothing but a choice of best suitable alternatives from a group of alternatives. The second is all functions of management consider decision making important. All functions of management, namely planning, organizing, staffing, controlling, directing, motivation, need effective decisions to operate them. The decisions relating to the structure, methods, nature of functions, division of work, authority, responsibility, and so on are taken every time and every day by a manager. The third is decision making helps in business policies. In making business policies, a broad assessment of various departments, their works, and their objective is made. And to perform this job of decision making is required. The third is measurement of efficiency of manager. Decision making is smart indirect method to appraise the efficiency of managers. A decision is taken by a manager and in consequences a huge profit is earned. On the other hand, a decision may spoil the goodwill of the company also. This may this way, the decision measure the skill, efficiency, and intellect of the manager. And the last point that can be cited is decision making is both ends and means. Decision making may work both as a means and as an end of the process. We will be discussing the process of decision making. The synonym of the word rational, according to most dictionaries, are logical, sensible, scientific, and the like. A rational decision must be distinguished from an intuitive decision which is based on past experiences of the manager and so often lacks objectivity. A rational decision is backed by scientific process involving analysis of the problem, collection of relevant data, review of key factors, evaluation of alternatives, choosing the best alternative, and so on. Such a decision should be justified on logical basis and does not suffer from personal bias of the decision maker. Thus, the scientific process of decision making involves number first, identifying or defining the problem, analyzing the problem, collection of data, next developing the alternatives or generating various alternatives, followed by evaluating the alternatives, choosing the best alternative, then implementing the decision and evaluating the decision thereof. So let's discuss the first step, that is defining the problem. Sufficient time should be spent on defining the problem as it is not always easy to define the problem and to see the fundamental thing in causing the trouble and the needs correction. Practically, no problem ever presents itself in a manner that an immediate decision may be taken. It is therefore essential to define the problem before the action is taken. Otherwise, manager will answer wrong question rather than the core problem. The next step is analyzing the problem. After clearly recognizing the problem, the next phase of decision making is to analyze the problem, which involves classifying the problem and gathering information. The problem should be classified keeping in view the following factors: the nature of the decision, whether it is strategic or a routine, the impact of the decision on other functions, the periodicity of the decision, and the limiting or the strategic factor relevant to the decisions. The next step is collection of data. A lot of information is required to classify the problem. So long as the required information is not available, any classification should be misleading. This will also have an adverse effect on the quality of the decision. Trying to analyze without facts is like guessing directions at a crossing without reading the highway signboards. Thus, collection of the right type of information is very important in the decision-making process. The fourth step in the decision-making process is developing the alternatives. After defining and analyzing the problem, the next step is in the decision-making is the development of alternative courses of action. Without resorting to the process of developing alternatives, a manager is likely to be guided by limited imagination. It is rare for alternatives to be lacking for any course of action. But sometimes a manager assumes that there is only one way of doing things. In such a case, what the manager has probably not done In such a case, what a manager has probably not done is to force himself consider other alternatives. Unless he does that, he cannot reach the decision which is the best possible. From this, we can say that a key planning principle, which may be termed as the principle of alternatives, is required in developing the alternatives. The next step is reviewing the key factors. While developing alternatives, principles of limiting factor has to be taken care of. A limiting factor is one which stands in the way of accomplishing the desired goal. It is a key factor in decision making. If such factors are probably identified, a manager can confine his research for alternatives to those which will continue the limiting factors. Depending upon the situations faced, the limiting factors may be inadequate funds, shortage of human resources, old machinery, lack of marketing skills, and so on. Moving ahead, the next step comes selecting the best alternative. In order to make final choice of the best alternative, one will have to evaluate possible alternatives. Peter Drucker has laid down 4 criteria in order to weigh the consequences of various alternatives. The first is risk, second is economy of effort, third is situation or timing, and the fourth one is limitation of resources. The second last step in the process is implementing the decision. The choice of an alternative will not serve any purpose if it is not put into practice. The manager is not only concerned with taking a decision but also its effective implementation. He should try to ensure the systematic steps are taken to implement the decision. The main problem which the manager may face at the implementation stage is the resistance by the subordinates who are affected by the decision. If a manager is unable to overcome those resistance, the energy and the efforts consumed in the decision-making process will go waste. In order to take decisions acceptable, it is necessary for the manager to make people understand what decisions involves, what is expected of them, and what they should expect from the management. This principle of slow and steady progress should be followed to bring out a change in the behavior of the subordinates. And the last step is the evaluation of the decision. As we implement the decision, going further, we need to keep a track and evaluate the decision in various aspects and should take timely feedback so the decision making process becomes very effective. That's all for today's session. Thank you.